This week, Lennart Koopmann, the CTO of Greylog, joins us for an interview about Nzyme, a free and open Wi-Fi defense system. Then Dutch Swartz, Principal Security Specialist at Amazon Web Services, joins us for a discussion on the lessons learned when migrating from on-prem to cloud. In the security news, Polish blogger sued after revealing security issue in encrypted messenger. The Facebook dump in Have I Been Pwned? Child tweets gibberish from a highly sensitive Twitter account. LinkedIn and more eggs. APTs targeting Fortinet. SAP applications are under attack again. Is your dishwasher trying to kill you? Ubiquity all but confirms breach response inequity. Cyber threat analysis, 11 useful security tips for AWS, and other stuff too. Signal adds cryptocurrency support. Not everyone's a fan. Zoom zero-click exploit when firmware attacks, attackers blowing up Discord, all that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Cybercriminals are using social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. PlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. PlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month.
And welcome to the show. Now, after that introduction, I kind of wonder what the more part is, but oh wait, the more part is Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome everyone to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 690, being recorded on April 8th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Let's see, Larry Pesce is here with us remotely. Larry, welcome.
Thank you. Yep, we made the decision last minute to go remote, but yeah, hey, here we are, and we're used to this by now. We've been doing this for a year, right?
Right, exactly. Also, all the hosts are other than myself, are remote. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to figure out how the mute button works. I misfired it a couple times earlier, but we are dialed in and ready to rock.
If we only had $1 for every time in the past year someone had issues with the mute button. Wow. Mr.
Boy,
Jeff Mann.
I'd have $2.
Right. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
I am 41 days away from becoming eligible to come to G-Unit Studios.
41 days. Wow. I can't wait. I'll be counting down the minutes.
My second vaccine will be on Cinco de Mayo, and then 2 weeks after that, I'm good to go.
Sweet. Can't wait. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Man, we're going to have to work out that timing. I want to be there for that big, awkward Jeff hug.
I know, right? It's going to be interesting. Everyone's just going to convert. No one's going to want to leave. Be coming into the office for oh, you guys are still here.
Pretty much.
Grab some sleeping bags. We'll just camp out.
That's it. Going to be a lot of fun. Our next live webcast will be held on April 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where you'll learn how to prepare for and prevent modern ransomware attacks. That's right, myself, Adrian Sanabria, and Jake Williams will be presenting that, sponsored by Cisco Umbrella. Our next technical training will be May 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We will explore common misconfigurations of Nginx with our fine friends at Detectify, the damage they could do and how to avoid them. That's Nginx, not Detectify. They don't do damage. They do good stuff. Glad to have that training in there. SecurityWeekly.com/webcast to register now. If you missed it, SecurityWeekly.com/untitled On demand gets you access to the entire archive. Lennart Koopmann is the CTO of Graylog, founded Graylog as an open source project in 2009, and joins us today to talk about Nzyme, his free Wi-Fi IDS project. Welcome, Lennart. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Lennart, I guess in customary Security Weekly fashion, I'm going to ask you how you get your start in information security.
It's actually interesting. I think I got into it through Graylog actually. So Graylog started was my open source project, very much like Nzyme today, except I knew much less about how to build software back then. But it started in 2009, and it was mostly for DevOps teams, for developers, for IT ops people, and then honestly, more and more security people started to use it. So that's when I was introduced to the community, and since then I've learned more and more, and I think that's really how I got started. It's a great community with a lot of people to learn from,
Lennart, describe for our audience what Graylog is.
Yeah, so Graylog is a free and open log management system. It's running on-premise. There's now recently a cloud version launched, but it has been on-premise for the longest time. Of course, it's still available on-premise. You get it on GitHub. It's open source, and you send it all your logs. Could be logs from your cloud systems, could be logs from your firewalls, from your operating systems, really anything that interests you. And like I said, I think it's an interesting tool for developers, for operations, for compliance. And then one of our biggest use cases is security. Some people use it as a SIM. Some people use it more for forensics and incident response. I think there are very many different ways to use it, but it's an open source log management tool.
Lennart, some people asked me, one person asked me an interesting question today after I gave a presentation, and they were talking about the kind of relationship that you have with the folks in the community, technology or security, when you have an open source project in terms of contributions back. And, my answer was some people agreed, haven't had the best experience and have either taken it closed source or abandoned projects for a number of reasons. Not getting people participating is one. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I think you gotta decide for the strategy for your product, and if a company forms behind it, which is what happened for Graylog. I think you got to decide how you kind of want to leverage the open source community. I think that the open source community provides a lot of value for the community itself. It is there's a lot of guides out there. There are great blog posts about how you can use Graylog processing pipelines to detect threats, for example. Way more than we could ever do, and I think especially for some systems that only have a smaller community out there. Like I'm always thinking about. There are people who are sending logs from their mainframe systems into Graylog. We will probably not provide a lot of content for that out of the box, but the security community, the community around Graylog is actually going to go in and is going to provide a lot of that. And I think that's something that is with the openness of a open source product, where the APIs are open, where you can develop additional codes, where there are a lot of APIs simply available. It is something where the community can provide a lot of things that go directly back to the community. And for Graylog, in our case, we've always had people who also develop code, who develop Graylog itself. And the cool thing is, a lot of them ended up working for Graylog. So a lot of the very early community members are some of the longest time employees today in Graylog as a company, which is really, of course, great to see.
That's awesome. So it sounds like there's still a lot of community involvement in giving back to the project.
Absolutely, and we want that. We love that, and we give back to the community too. So Graylog has been a sponsor of the Blue Team Village at DEF CON, for example, for a very long time. And it's just great to be there and have these people who never bought anything from us and probably never will buy anything from us, and it's completely fine. Who will drop by and just have some questions or show us something that they built, And I think that's an awesome thing about open source, and I think a lot of kind of decisions in the product that make the product more attractive to the user in the end are driven by an open source community and by having 40,000, 50,000 deployments out there that are hammering the systems with their use cases and that have certain demands and certain ideas on how it should be used. It almost forces you to make really good decisions and things that are in the interest of the user. And I think that in the end is in the interest of everyone.
Tyler?
So curious, what from a technical and ingestion standpoint, what are the formats you guys are ingesting? You taking in all the router switch traffic? You taking in sysmon, event viewer data? What kind of format is the ingestion engine able to handle?
I always like to say pretty much anything that Greylock can blend into a text and a timestamp. We've had this mainframe example. There was this grocery company somewhere in Indiana. They had this old IBM mainframe in the basement, and we managed to get those logs into Greylock too. So it's a very flexible system in the end. It comes pre-built for a lot of the common formats. So if you have sysmon, you run a WinLogBeat, for example, then you can very easily send that data into Greylock, and Greylock's just going to parse it out of the box. If you have something that we might not recognize, we'll simply read the text that you send us over a socket. And then you can apply parsing rules, you can apply pipelines, do enrichment, do all of that stuff. It's simply a little more manual work, but I cannot remember a case where a log format couldn't be processed by Greylock in the end.
So as part of that enrichment, does that also include the ability to be able to build dashboards and alerting outside of just parsing the data?
Yeah, it comes with the full web interface that allows you to build reports, allows you to put alerts on top of it, dashboards, views, saved searches, kind of all the good stuff that I think you're used to from other non-open log management tools that are out there. Yeah.
So what are the differentiations between, say, something like an Elk Stack or a Splunk instance? What kind of benefits do you see? Obviously, open source is amazing. That's considering how much Splunk costs from a data ingestion side as you start to exponentially grow that. What other benefits does Greylog have, and what kind of comparison does it have to something like Splunk?
Yeah, absolutely. I think compared to the Elastic Stack, which is another fantastic open source solution out there, I think one of the big benefits is that Greylock has been built for logs. I think Elastic is great to look at any kind of data out there, but it also means that you have to make it work for logs. There's a lot of manual work, a lot of kind of wrangling with the system to make it work effectively for logs, both from a maintenance perspective as well as I think a kind of just daily use perspective of it from an analyst perspective. From Splunk, I mean, obviously there's the cost factor. I think that's the first thing everyone thinks about. But the moment I think you use the Greylock search interface, you're gonna discover a lot of nuances that we hear people who've used both say that they really like about Greylock, that they feel much closer to the data. So especially when you do something like threat hunting, when you do something where you might just go in, you don't even know yet what you're looking for, the Greylock interface has been built to discover and answer questions in a very iterative way, instead of feeling like, okay, this is more like a database query that gets very complex, that will give me precisely the answer that I want, but I sometimes feel like I already need to know what specifically I'm looking for. It's hard to describe without showing it, but in Greylock, it's more of a, hey, let me look in this direction, let me look in that direction, and all is just very snappy, comes back really fast, and allows you to pivot across the data in very many different, extremely fast ways. And I think that's one of the things that people really like about it. And then there's the openness, there's the huge community. I mean, there's a lot of things I think that differentiate it besides just the price.
Lennart, at some point you decided to look into Wi-Fi security. What made you look in that direction? I mean, it's not as hot of a topic as it was, 10 plus years ago, right?
That's absolutely true. I think I kind of made my way there through. I was playing around with SDR, or software-defined radio. I've always been, I think, very fascinated by wireless technologies. Just this idea that with a few milliwatts, I can sit here and just generate a signal that someone else far away might be able to receive and decode the information. And I think that's something that has always been very fascinating to me. So I've been playing around with software-defined radio, and I think you're only one step away from something like the Wi-Fi Kinect, and then that makes you interested in, hey, this is all really, really insecure. Like I kind of feel bad about my Wi-Fi at home. Like this has not been designed with a lot of security in mind, and it seems like it's really, really easy, even for people without a lot of effort to attack a wireless network. And so that's when I started playing around with it. And I think the next thing that everybody does is just get a Wi-Fi interface, a Wi-Fi card that supports monitor mode, and just look at Wireshark and just see what's in the air, now me having been a software developer for the longest time in my life, I feel, of course, the next idea for me was I should be able to parse these. I should be able to do some stuff with it. So I was just playing around with it, and I have been looking at that time. I have been looking for a fun side project, because for Greylock now, I'm the CTO at Greylock. We're at a size where the CTO of Greylock does no longer write code for good reason. But I wanted something where I could still write code on the weekends, over Christmas, after work, because I like writing code. And I think it's very important once you become a manager to not get into a mood where you kind of romanticize your old days of writing code, where you only remember the good things, but never the annoying bug that you thought takes 5 minutes to fix and actually took the whole day to fix. So to kind of keep the reality of writing code in mind, so I can be a better manager for our employees. I said I want to have a side project. It will not be for the foreseeable future. It won't be as serious as Greylock, because all my work goes into Greylock. But it just seemed to fit. I was looking for something to write that has a purpose that other people might want to use, and I was playing around with Wi-Fi. So these two things came together, and I thought, hey, I guess I can detect some things. So I was just playing around with it. I guess that's what happened.
So Paul, if I may, so
please
Lennart,
do that.
I teach the SANS wireless course. I'm one of the co-authors. I think in recent memory that there's been those red letter dates in history, like when the big Wi-Fi thing happened that was amazing for our course. One of them was crack, because that was all of a sudden there was this huge renewed interest. And for me was Nzyme, because there's really no good I changed my mind. There was no really good open source wireless IDS monitoring solution that could do what Nzyme can.
Yeah, no, Larry and Lennart, if you could explain the differences between Nzyme and Kismet to me, that would be fabulous, right?
Yeah. Should I start, and then you can add whatever you have in mind to it. I think the difference between Nzyme and Kismet is another fantastic open source tool out there. I'm actually linking to Kismet on the Nzyme website, and say like, hey, this is what Nzyme does. This is what Kismet does. If you've got to decide what you want to do, and here's the Kismet website. It's awesome, great tool, huge community, great people behind it. I think the difference is that from my perspective, Kismet is more on a reconnaissance, maybe war driving. Maybe I've heard about some red team use cases for it. If I should describe it in one sentence, I would say Nzyme is designed to be deployed in a grid of sensors that never move, but completely monitor everything that's in range, and that put all of the code and all of the intelligence into trying to detect adversaries and leave you alone if nothing's going on and everything's all right. What it basically does is it is moving, I think, one step further from the existing signature-based approaches, where you would say, hey, here are all my access points. These are the BSSIDs, or you could describe it as a MAC address of these access points. And whenever you see a different access point advertising my network with a different MAC address, that means someone spun up a rogue access point, and then please alert me. The problem with Wi-Fi is that these things are so easy to spoof that I believe even everyone who's just trying a little bit will probably very easily spoof these things. So what I did after I kind of figured out how to record these packets, how to process them, how to get intelligence out of them, I was thinking about, if I was an attacker, if I was walking around with a Wi-Fi pineapple with some sort of attack platform, what would I have a really hard time spoofing? And the first thing that came to my mind was you would on kind of a waterfall chart of signal strength, you would most likely create a second signal track somewhere, because you have this access point, which is probably, let's say 15 feet away from your Nzyme sensor, and has a certain signal strength. It's always going to be in that kind of waterfall, almost like in a submarine movie, where you got the sonar signal and you get this track of it. If someone sits in a parking lot with a Wi-Fi pineapple, that's going to be a different signature on that. So I put some rules and some analysis and some statistical analysis in place that will kind of create a box To be honest, I was watching Hunt for Red October, and that inspired me a little for the face. But one thing only. It actually draws a box around every signal track that it sees, and if the moment there are more than one signal tracks, that means that there's something that attempts to spoof your legitimate hardware. And it doesn't matter what the metadata is in it. It only looks at the signal strength in that case. It can also look at the metadata. It can create fingerprints. It can do a ton of stuff. But I try to focus on, okay, after these very signature-based, easy to spoof things, what do you have a hard time spoofing as an attacker? And that's I think, what these new set of alerts are really trying to focus on.
Now, can this sit alongside of a lot of the kind of advanced monitoring that some of the, we'll say, higher-end commercial gear is starting to move to, or even consumer gear, where they do have an additional radio that's monitoring for access points of the same name? This can run in conjunction with that, correct?
100%. The whole thing is designed to be cheap and easy to deploy. You don't need any special hardware. You need actually got one. It's in a cable. I can show it, but you need a Wi-Fi adapter that supports monitor mode on your Linux, which, because of Kali Linux and all the others, there are very comprehensive lists of everything that works. It's basically all the alpha cards you find on Amazon. They're going to support it. Monitor mode, for those who don't know what it is, it's like a promiscuous mode of your Ethernet card, where it will record anything that comes in, and you just tell it, send me all the packets that are on this, or all the frames that are on this frequency right now. And monitor frames and Wi-Fi are not encrypted, so you can actually record all of them. So you need one of those cards. It's just USB. I think they start at probably $20-$30. You connect it to a Raspberry Pi. I started developing it on a Raspberry 3, and I'm now running it on a Raspberry 4, and it's like, I think 10% load or something. So it's you can build the whole setup for probably, Amazon Prime. You're going to deliver tomorrow. It's going to cost you maybe $40 to $50, even with the case for the Raspberry Pi. That's what it was designed to do. It's supposed to run on commodity hardware that you might have laying around right now. You just download it and run it.
I do have said hardware laying around.
Have you had any luck doing monitor mode on the built-in Broadcom chipset for the Raspberry Pi? I know there's some patches out there and that type of stuff, but for me, the USB is a heck of a lot easier to do. But have you tried with the built-in Broadcom?
I did on the Raspberry Pi 3. I actually have a to-do to try it on the new 4. I believe the driver for that is called Nexmon or something like that.
Yeah, Nexmon.
They even work on the Raspberry Pi 0. They designed those drivers to replace the kernel module for it, basically, and it's gonna it will allow you to put it in monitor mode. I tried that on the 3; it worked fantastically well. So I guess it will work on the. I wouldn't know why it wouldn't work on the 4. It seems to be really solid, really good software. Yeah, and that's open source too, and you just download it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, Lennart, can you tell? You talked about the sort of the rogue access point, the evil twin, as it were. What are some of the other detections that you can do sort of now? And if we were looking as someone who wants to contribute to an open source project, how would we add new detection methods?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I think it's great. Two great questions. So the first one, what else does it do besides the signal tracks? Another thing it does is, for example, it builds fingerprints. Another thing that is hard to prove in Wi-Fi frames is there's a certain, so you kind of from user space, you can change a lot of the metadata of a Wi-Fi frame, like a MAC address, a SSIDs or network name, channel, supported channel modes, things like that are often very dynamic. But there's a second set of parameters in those frames, which you can actually see in Wireshark. And those are usually not changed. And those are actually sometimes pretty hard to change because your Wi-Fi hardware might in fact insist on setting them for certain things. So it either stays in its regulatory bounds, so it doesn't violate FCC rules, or so it can actually in fact send it properly. So there are some things that usually don't change. I'm looking at all these parameters and I'm basically building a checksum over them. This idea is coming from this horrible idea of, I think, some shopping malls and other places deployed these sensors to try to track you and your phone to find out how you move through a mall. Then Apple and Android and all the others came out and they started to randomize their MAC addresses. And then they said, no, we can still fingerprint. So there are some papers about how they do that, and I looked at that, and I tried to run this fingerprinting, and I changed it up a little to make it as reliable as possible. And basically, it turns out that every Wi-Fi pineapple in the world has a specific fingerprint. Every of these little ESP author things, like I actually got one here. This little thing here with this little antenna on top is just gonna try to jam your whole Wi-Fi environment by de-authenticating everyone from it. That thing is using a specific fingerprint. The access point that you use to connect to your Wi-Fi pineapple has a specific fingerprint, and even the free Wi-Fi thing that it can advertise has a specific fingerprint. So I started to collect all of these, and I put them in Nzyme, and it can detect them. And the moment you turn on a Wi-Fi pineapple, you only turn it on. You don't even start PineAP or anything else as part of an attack. The moment you turn it on, and it has either its public access point or its management access point enabled, or it starts sending its attack frames, Nzyme is immediately going to detect it, and it's even going to tell you that this is a Pineapple Nano with firmware version 2.02. Or it can tell you this is a Ponagotchi, which is another platform out there. And it can even tell you its ID because the Ponagotchi decided to broadcast that everywhere for gamification. So that's a lot of additional kind of very attack platform specific detection. And from my experience from Graylog, I knew that if you hard code this, so if you don't let the user influence this, they will always be limited to what I build into it, right? And me knowing that this is my free time thing, there's for sure more platforms out there you want to detect. I built this whole thing in a way where in the web interface, you can in fact click these together and you can say, I am looking for this very specific Wi-Fi pineapple and alert me whenever this thing comes back up. Or you have found a rogue access point and it only pops up sometime during the day. Send me an alert when it's back. And on top of that, and we can talk about that in another question if you want, but on top of that, you can even use a tracker device, which is communicating with Nzyme to physically locate that thing. Because I built another piece of software that communicates with Nzyme that gives you a little interface on your phone or a little display that you can connect to your Raspberry Pi. That's try to kind of hone in on whatever we call it a bandit. So whatever kind of rogue device you define and you described in Nzyme. And you can go and you can use a directional antenna if you have one. You can also use a normal one. And you can literally kind of go around and try to find it. And it's going to show you if you're moving towards it or if you're moving away from it. So this way, you might even be able to physically locate a attack platform in someone's backpack, in a car, in the parking lot. So that's another thing that Nzyme can do.
Lennart, I just want to point out that the randomizing your MAC address, like on your Android phone, that when I saw that feature and had to disable it because it got in my way of actually configuring a legitimate IoT device, I was like, I kind of really hate that feature. Like, I understand why, but I hate that feature. It's awful. Yeah. It breaks.
And they're still tracking you. So
and they're still tracking me. Yeah. So I just always turn it off because it gets in the way. It makes stuff break.
Yeah. Yeah.
Curious from an attacker standpoint, is there ways around this detection that you found so far? Has anybody poked holes in this?
So the second question was what can the open source community do here to help? I think that would be one of my answers. I would love to see how people evade it. I would in fact love for someone to deploy this and then maybe have a red team friend try to get around it. I would love to see that. I mean, I think we're all hackers at heart. And the idea for Nzyme is not to make the Wi-Fi pineapple worthless. I think it is to up everyone's game in the end, and I think there's a lot of game to up on the Wi-Fi defense side. But I would love for people to just try and see what happens, I would love to hear their experiences and would love to hear some smart people see how they think they could get around it. That would be awesome. Everything else, I mean, I'm happy about. There's certainly some bugs in there that I would love for people to fix. There are roadmap items. So on the code, if anybody wants to write that, I'll be happy to reach out first, so we can talk about it first, so that work doesn't go to waste. Or documentation, if documentation is unclear. I've had the first person just reach out. They wanted to build free BSD packages. I mean, I'm happy about any contributions. An open source project. Let's make it a cool thing.
That's awesome. So yeah, Leonard. So I can think of a number of ways in which I'd want to use it that maybe you haven't already implemented for some of the detection methods. Like I think I can think about some of the denial of service type of attacks that are, maybe ones that we're not as familiar with. Everybody's heard of the deauth and disassociate.
Yeah.
Specifically, one that I think of that is pretty valuable to me, and potentially moving into WPA3 networks when they start seeing a lot more exposure, is what's known as the RTS-CTS co-opting attack. Specifically, some things that we can look for here is the duration field in the header. So we've got our protocol, our type, and our subtype, and then the frame control fields. Immediately after the frame control field is the duration, which is multi-use. Using that multi-use field of a value of 32,767 for RTS-CTS packets is like virtually unheard of, and can be used for denial of service. So seeing values over a specific range in that might be indicative of a very unusual denial of service type of attack. So those are some of the things I think about extending it for.
That would be awesome. And if someone out there has these ideas but doesn't feel like writing the code for it, I would love to hear them. For me, a big part of this is to simply learn, right? I would love to just understand what the attack is, try to reproduce it, and think about how Nzyme can detect it. So send me an email. I would love that. That's really what I'm aiming for. Yeah.
So
yeah. So Lee, before you get to this, Leonard, I think you've made instant friends with just about everyone at the Security Weekly production, between sending in your headshot with the cat, and talking nerdery about Wi-Fi and Greylog. I think you've made some instant friends here.
I love it.
So Larry's question reminded me of something back when I was taking 617 from him. One of the challenges was being able to monitor all the different Wi-Fi modes and standards that are out there. He mentions WPA3. How challenging is it for you to get like a WPA3, or make sure we can not only get 2.4 but 5 gig? I mean, is that now a no-brainer, or is still a challenge to stay up?
So I think from purely a technical perspective, I'm kind of standing on the shoulder of giants there, because I use lib pcap, which is basically what TCP dump uses under the hood. And they put the work in of actually parsing these things, so I get the information of what's in the Wi-Fi frames. And they support WPA3, so I don't have to go in and write firmware code for the Wi-Fi adapters, or I don't have to go in and write like some deep C code to just take a byte array and try to figure out what's going on in that data that was received. I'm still dealing with a whole bunch of byte arrays, certainly in Nzyme, because there's still a lot of stuff you got to parse out yourself manually. But luckily, the 802.11 Wi-Fi standard is pretty well documented. It's almost too well documented because we have a hard time finding anything in that huge document, but it's all there. So from that perspective, I should be able to. That sounds like, I think I had the first person who said that Nzyme does not currently detect their specific WPA3 encryption type, which is a new one that Nzyme simply doesn't know about. So it sets it to unknown or NA or something like that. That sounds like something that's probably like a Sunday afternoon work, and then it supports it. I think the more challenging part is for me to actually learn more about WPA3, because the packets are the packets, what they do, what they mean, and how they can be exploited. I think that's really where what will take some time to understand, and that's why I would love to have people tell me their experiences from the community. And also, like I said, that's part of the reason for this project, right? To not get rusty and become a CTO with Excel for the rest of my life, but nerd out about some WPA3 attack methods on the weekend too. Mm-hmm. So that's the two things. There's technical, and then also just understanding the protocol part of it.
Lennart, just backing up to a more high-level architecture. So with Nzyme, can I have multiple sensors spread throughout my facility, and then have like my web management interface in a central location? Like, is it distributed like that?
So not yet. That is the next big thing on the roadmap. What I want to be able to get to is that you can basically form this net of Nzyme sensors, and you're going to get this web interface that right now is only basically one node, and every node would have its own web interface, and they don't know about each other. I want to get this in this federated mesh kind of net where I think we could even get smart about how they exchange data and kind of make this all, keep it easy to deploy. Just throw a bunch of Raspberry Pis in the corners and just leave them there. What I want to get to is that these then, when they detect a bandit, when they detect an adversary, that you can see on a map of your campus, your office, your home, wherever you are. You can place where these sensors are, and you can, I think we talked about ubiquity in the beginning. They have this really nice interface of where you see where your access points are and the signal strength with the walls in between and everything. Something like that, but you will be able to see which sensor is detecting something with what signal strength. And I think then we're only one step away from really triangulating this.
Right.
And I want to see how good that really works, because I think that Wi-Fi signals in buildings with glass and walls and everything could be, I don't know yet how accurate it's going to be, but in a perfect world, we'll end up with a live update of a position of a adversary, something you're tracking in the web interface, because you simply got at least 3 reference points from which you can then at least maybe kind of roughly find out in which direction this person or this device might be, and then from there we can go crazy. We can report these. We can build tracks in the history. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be done. I released this version 1.0 because I wanted to get it out of the door so I get feedback. I think the next versions are actually going to are going to be much bigger and way more interesting.
Yeah, the client server architecture certainly is a lot more to code and design and build, but super useful. I'm even thinking security wise too. I want to know when certain clients, whether they connect to my Wi-Fi network or not, I want to know when they're in range and they come and go. I mean, that's a really cool feature.
You could define them as a bandit, and you would get an alert the moment this thing sends a single frame that's recorded by Nzyme. You could put an alert on it, and I think probably not this release, but the following release is going to have triggers. Right now, it can send emails when that happens, and it's going to show you an alert in the web interface. Why not execute a local script so you can decide what to do when that happens, and run a Python script or trigger an API or do something else.
Yeah. Paul, I'm reminded of the story, and it came back up again for whatever reason, about a couple of teenagers that went and did some graffiti, some anti-Semitic graffiti on their high school, and the only reason they got caught is because they were students at that school and their phones had connected to the Wi-Fi network. They were already there, and that was how it got connected. And I'd love to see that for the bandits as just regular clients, being able to detect when new Wi-Fi clients are probing for networks, looking around, like someone pulls into our driveway and is casing the place to rob it.
Yeah,
and then they come back a couple weeks later.
Zero Chaos had the Bluetooth monitor, so he knew when his mother-in-law pulled up to the house because her car or phone or earpiece had a specific Bluetooth ID.
my favorite example of something like this is and you can Google that, there were hackers not only linked to Russian intelligence, but Russian intelligence officers who have been indicted actually, who were trying to attack the OPCW lab, which is something for the control of chemical weapons. And they tried to figure out what was going on in there. And so they literally rented a car and put a bunch of alpha antennas and pineapples in the back of that car. And they were actually detected by Dutch intelligence, and they arrested them right there on the spot. That's a crazy story. If you Google that, it's the OPCW hack. I think that was one of the things that when, sometimes you hit this point where you've been working on something like this for a while, and you're like, is it really worth it? Would anybody ever use that? And I think that's when the story came out, and I just saw that pineapple, and there must have been Dutch intelligence with little antennas going around. That's when I thought, okay, I gotta keep going. I'm going to keep on going with this. That's a super interesting story.
I remember the story. I'm just astonished that it's open source, because we get back to that Kismet question, in that Kismet, you're very much right. In my opinion, is very much the reconnaissance stuff, and it had the ability to do some very limited detection, and it wasn't really ever built for that. But Nzyme is above and beyond, and arguably starting to rival some commercial products already, and makes it accessible for those that don't have some sort of commercial product available to them, and students, and
well, yeah, I mean that commercial product, so Larry, was Pony Express. It was the commercial product.
Yeah, and admittedly, Pwn Pulse, that product.
Yep. That
wasn't cheap. I mean, my CFO, my wife, wouldn't agree to let me put something like that in. But $40-$50 for Raspberry Pi and maybe a wireless adapter, could totally get that under the.
Between you and I, we could have a fleet of a couple dozen or probably a lot more sensors.
I don't know what you're talking about. I swear, like there's no Raspberry Pis here.
Lennart, are there plans to add Bluetooth support?
So I've heard that from several people. I've designed the code is designed to actually support modules. So everything is kind of right now encapsulated in the only module, which is the Port 11 module, which is the 802.11 Wi-Fi standard. Maybe Bluetooth. I think I just got to catch up on a lot of things to understand Bluetooth attack surface a little more. So it has been designed to be extended in the future. I think one thing that I'm thinking about is could you connect one of those $30 little SDR software-defined radios to it and look at other stuff, maybe hack RF in the beginning. It's just, I think, very developer friendly. Because I think
you're just making more friends. I swear.
Yeah, because that's like something I always wanted to see in the Pony Express line that I don't think they ever officially added. I think they were working on it. I think they were just Bluetooth and Wi-Fi at the time.
So I could definitely see that. I think there's a lot of things, first of all, to do for Wi-Fi. It's designed to be modular. And another thing that I could think about is Zigbee and all of these automation things. There are some of these industrial IoT standards out there, which I also have no clue. So I have to read up a lot of things first. But I could imagine there's some funky stuff going on in the wireless spectrum,
Yeah, you could tell when I unlocked my car, opened my garage door, conceivably, with the right hardware. I don't know if the Hack RF does what the limitations are. You guys know better than I. But being able to monitor all of the wireless spectrums, or as many as you can, was always a huge plus for me, right? Because I have some Zigbee, some Z-Wave stuff in my house. I want to be able to monitor that as well.
Yeah,
you think about Z-Wave with a CC1111 at $30. Now Zigbee with the CC2531 for about $10 for doing monitoring. The $30 RTL SDR. The possibilities are potentially endless for some of this type of stuff.
As endless as your USB power and bus speeds will allow. I would
get a powered hub for your Raspberry Pi if you want more than 2 alpha adapters.
Would you be limited by bus speed, right? I don't know what the USB bus data bus is, right, on the Pis. I'd assume there would be a limit. I don't know how you would hit that, but it would be a limit.
The Wi-Fi adapters sent you pretty slim data, in fact, because they do a lot of the stuff on board in their systems. But I think the moment you want to do RTL or SDR, they just send you the whole bandwidth. Then bus speed could really become an issue for sure.
Right.
Yeah. And Leonard, that's actually some testing that I'm doing end of this weekend into next as well about the Pi bus speed and some of this type of stuff.
Gosh.
But between USB 2, the Hack RF is still USB 2 supported and can max out the bandwidth for the bus there. But on the Pi 4, there's still the USB 3 bus, which RTL SDR and all those other devices I think could very easily handle. And then even add writing all of that out to SD, an SSD on the same USB bus. I think we're well within in spec there. And then if you start thinking about something like you're getting a little bit more expensive, the Raspberry Pi compute module and the I/O board, you're converting USB 3 to PCIe. So yeah, you're doing pretty well, I think.
They're really hard to get right now. That was exactly what I was thinking about. I tried to get a hold of one. They're just really hard to get right now. I got a 3D printer recently. I mean, I just need more cases to print. I mean, that's
Yeah, it's amazing. Sorry, Lee. The cost of everything that's come down and just continues to come down over time, right? A lot of this equipment we're talking about was way more expensive if you could even get it. Now we can get USB dongles that do just this amazing stuff on the Raspberry Pi. Larry, I think that's why we started hacking on the WT54G, was essentially get that low cost, a lot of functionality in a small embedded device. I think the Pis now have kind of surpassed that for this type of work.
Yeah, I mean, the Raspberry Pi 4 is just amazing. I mean, the part that breaks in it is the SD card from time to time. So always keep an image of that. But I mean, I'm just blown away by how the Raspberry Pi changed the world almost. I remember when the first one came out, and I think it's kind of VGA and no HDMI and everything, but that was so cool already. It just makes things accessible. That's what I love about it.
Lee?
I mean, it sounds like you could do a Kickstarter right now with something like the Flipper that raised $4 million in, was it, like 2 weeks?
Yeah, cool. That's actually the Flipper thing. I'm also trying to get a hold of one of those and just see what that does to Nzyme. That's part of the fun too. Just also play a little bit of the red team role, and just see what happens when you turn that thing on and just research it.
So Lennart, when you were talking earlier, and the folks were setting stuff up, you said you might be able to give us a demo.
Yeah, I can. I can share my screen, show you the web interface if you want. Just click around and get you a feeling of it.
That'd be awesome. And we had another request from some folks as well. They want to see Gary. Gary's famous now.
I think Gary's outside right now. I live in Houston.
Oh no!
So there's a big garden, and he's walking around somewhere outside. If I find him, if I hear him, I'm going to get him inside.
Awesome. Gary's famous.
Mm-hmm.
Gary's my cat, and he's great. Could I just share my screen and show some of it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Let's go. I'm going to share my Firefox. Here we go. I guess you see that, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to keep it short. I just want to give you a feeling of what it does. I'm on purpose. I'm calling it a Wi-Fi defense system because I think really that's what it is. I don't think it's an intrusion detection system because I think it does more. I have zoomed in here. You see I'm at 133%, so everyone can see a little more. I will not guarantee that my CSS and my HTML will survive that. So I think it will. We'll see. I might have to zoom down back to 100%. It works on mobile pretty well, actually. So I'm logging in. What we have here is that's kind of my deployment here in my living room. Has 2 alpha adapters on it. I think one is listening on the 2.4 gigahertz, and the other one's on the 5 gigahertz, 5G. I actually have the Anonymizer turned on. That is a feature that's not documented yet, but it will basically scramble all the MAC addresses and the SSIDs because I do not want to constantly dox myself with SSIDs and BSSIDs in range. So if you ever want a demo of this, you can actually turn the Anonymize feature on. It's going to keep a table of the original SSID and then what it translated to. So if you see weird SSIDs in here, I simply took the WiggleNet top 1,000 or something list of SSIDs and replaced them randomly. Basically, what you see is it currently has no alerts. It has no contacts. A contact is basically when a bandit, which I can show in a second, is detected in your environment. And you got system status overall. If that's green, all's well. This might change to yellow or to red if something with the system itself is not right, like someone unplugs one of the Wi-Fi networks. Go through the last 5 alerts that were active here. You see that from a few days ago. This was actually when I tried out the new Wi-Fi Pineapple, which is in this corner over there, so I can't show it right now, but I just tried the new Mark 7 Wi-Fi Pineapple. So that were the alerts that triggered there. Showed you if it had any bandit contacts. So like I said, contacts are whenever a defined bandit is tracked, and we'll actually try to follow it. There's some logic there. And then we see here that I got my 2 alpha adapters here, and they're both running as a monitor probe. A monitor probe is basically the thing that that runs an enzyme that monitors the whole spectrum that you configured it to. I told it to listen. This one here is listening on all the 2.4 gigahertz channels. This one here is listening on all the 5 gigahertz channels. So you already see there's way more traffic here on my 2 gigahertz Wi-Fi environment. You see here, this is all the frames that were recorded kind of in total. It's always funny when neighbors have a party and all the iPhones and everything else starts to show up. There was in the before times, before last year, there were always funny spikes in here. And you can see when everyone left again. That was always interesting. Click on the networks. You get an overview here of all the networks that are in range. Like I said, these SSIDs and the MAC addresses are all scrambled. I could click this one here. Is in fact, this is mine. This you see here has a very, very high signal strength. I click on it. It shows you all the channels that it's currently seeing it on. It shows you which of these channels is the most active right now, which I believe is channel 1. If I click on it, I'm actually getting an overview here of what's going on in this network. The beacon rate is interesting. The beacon rate is basically every access point out there is constantly advertising its existence. And this is what your iPhone, your computer, anything that builds you a list of all the networks in range, they're just listening for these beacon frames. And these beacon frames say, hey, I'm network so-and-so corporate guest. I'm on this channel. I support these modes, and you can connect to me if you want to. If someone is trying to start an evil twin attack or something else that would that would kind of spin up a second access point that looks like yours, trying to lure you into it, by definition, the beacon rate is going to change because you still record all the beacons from your access point. But on top of that, there's definitely going to be a second access point adding more beacons here. So you can set this limit, which I set to 200, should really be more, maybe 70 or so. When that crosses over it, you get an alert and it says you got an unusual rate of beacons going on here in your environment. You see here, this is your signals that have been recorded in the last 5 minutes per channel, and then also with their signal strength. And you see down here, this here is this waterfall that I was talking about, which is on this network, because it's such a high signal strength, it doesn't show you very much. So let me change to one. Let's go to this one here. That's probably the neighbors. That one. You see this here? This is basically this track of this access point, and this red line here is where Nzyme detected that this is a track. If now I was at a different location of this access point, and I would be advertising the same network acting like that access point, you would have a second track popping up here somewhere, either to the right if it's closer to you, or to the left if it's further away. If I run this for the last 24 hours, you see here that, in fact, this thing was off from 9:30 Central to, in the morning, 6:15 Central. For some reason, this access point was off. And it did detect here a second track. This, I think my detection here is not fully tuned for this setup, but this year it would have sent you an alert and say like, hey, I detected 2 tracks, but it only did so for probably 1 minute, and there's a threshold when it actually sends an alert. So it would have probably not been a false positive. But this year, this is the Hunt for Red October kind of display, where you, instead of tracking the sonar signal of a vessel, you actually track the signal strength of an access point, and you would see when it changes. Then we got all the alerts, of course. So let's take this one here, for example. This one. This shows me that there was the management access point of a ESP8266D authentication platform was detected. Shows me when it was first seen, last seen. It applied an ID to it, so you can track it later. Showed me how many frames, which subsystem. Shows you all kinds of related information. Other alerts in here. This one, multiple signal tracks. That's what I mentioned. Whenever there's multiple of these tracks, it's usually a pretty bad sign. I think in that case, that was me experimenting with an attack platform, trying to detect it. I think Nzyme has about 10 different alerts built in by default, and it also has all these bandits built in here by default. And you see here that it will detect all kinds of Wi-Fi pineapples. It will detect Wi-Fi Fisher. It will detect this the author. So basically, the moment you turn this on, it's gonna cause what's called a contact. And you can also create your own if you want to. So this, create a new bandit, and you can give it all kinds of identifiers. So you could say when something comes in that is advertising the SSID test with a signal strength in between this, or with a specific fingerprint, you can add all of these different identifiers and build your own bandit definitions. So if you're looking for something very specific, you can set it up this way, and it will alert you, like a little like in Clifford Stahl's The Cuckoo's Egg, where he set up this alert whenever the attacker comes back. It's a little like that. It might have been a little inspired by that too.
Only he was using patch cables at the time.
And jingling his keys, right?
I was just talking to Cliff on the phone like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice. I think, Jeff, I actually read the book after you recommended it at some conference. That's how that came together. So what I can actually do, I didn't plan this for the demo, so let's hope it works, but I can just plug this battery into this de-authenticator platform and not even start an attack, but just turn the device on, and I think it should be detected. So I'm going to plug this in. I don't know if you see my video right now or not, but it just turned itself on. And I believe that we should, within a few moments, if the demo gods are with me today, we should actually see a new alert coming in that will automatically refresh. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't even touch it. I just turned it on. It's still on the kind of standard menu, and it immediately says I go to bandit contact the ESP8266D author, and it tells me it counts the frames up. It's now tracking it, and I could now send one of these tracker devices, which I currently don't have set up. The documentation shows these and actually has a few screenshots here. Let me just show you that real quick, and then I'm done with my demo. But in my release blog post here on Nzyme.org, you will actually see this. That's the interface of this tracker device that you put on a USB battery, take with you, or put a little interface on top of it, a little display on top of it on a Raspberry Pi. And then now I could follow this, and I would be able to physically locate this bandit that I just turned on by instructing this tracker to find it, basically. So that's another thing that this thing do. I'm working on making this easier and this a little more accessible, because you need like another piece of hardware. It's another $25 off of Amazon. But this is all going to be easier in the future. But I've played around with it where I asked someone to hide a pineapple somewhere in the building, and I tried to find it, and it actually worked. So that was a fun exercise. But yeah, just to give an impression of what it does, that's the Nzyme interface, and it's all, like I said, Nzyme.org. If you go to download, I have Debian packages, and there is in the documentation right here, we have the installation guide for an Ubuntu server if you want to use that, or for the Raspberry Pi, and it's about 5 steps. And then you configure it, and you start it, and you open the web interface, and you're good to go.
When you showed the demo, Lennart, my thoughts went initially to how do I get an antenna on the outside of my house? So now I'm looking for recommendations, because I want to monitor, like, not just my house, but like most of my neighborhood as well. Because I think that would be fun. That would give me lots more data to play around with.
That's true.
Paul, don't put the antenna outside. Just put the whole Raspberry Pi outside in a waterproof case. Ask me how I know this.
Interesting. We must chat later.
Yeah, question.
Well, I wanted to make a comment real quick for those that are just listening to this. It's Nzyme without an E on it, if you're trying to find it. But as long as I'm talking, I am somewhat goaded into asking the dreaded PCI question. Do you have any idea, Lennart, what PCI requirement you satisfy with this device?
So here's a funny story. I tried to find that out, and here's an ask for the community. If someone could tell me that would be awesome. Because I'm not sure. I think I satisfy something with this from a PCI perspective. I was talking at a bar during RSA last
That's the best
year.
place to find people that do PCI as a bar.
Find some PCI consultant who couldn't really tell me. He was not sure. So I'm still not sure, because I haven't met any PCI consultants. If someone could tell me, I'd be very interested. I'm sure it's
Paul, the one requirement minus 2.
11.1
There you go.
is monitoring Wi-Fi. There is a monitoring Wi-Fi networks in PCI, right?
11.1 is monitor for the presence of Wi-Fi networks and rogue devices and unauthorized hotspots, and so on and so forth. So you're absolutely falling squarely under 11.1.
See, I should have like a PCI like cheat sheet, but I have Jeff, so it's good.
Now what you need, Paul, is like mad money. You need actually a PCI buzzword bingo board, and we can just hit it. Every time Jeff says,
"Oh, hey, it's Jeff. Jeff is here."
We
hey, welcome,
do that.
Jeff.
It's Jeff. Yeah,
Hi.
we do that on Security and Compliance Weekly already. We Scott keeps a counter going, and there's a buzzer that goes off every time that PCI is mentioned, as well as pen testing.
Well, that's awesome. I was just stumbling along, and I actually stumbled into this Skype call. So it's amazing how that happens.
Is that a pun about network stumbler? Is that Wi-Fi stumbler? Isn't it? That's a thing.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That was a stretch, Paul.
That was a stretch, right?
I think you're overthinking
That's where we were talking about Wi-Fi. That's where my brain was. Lennart, we just have 5 questions for you. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I think I am.
3 words to describe yourself.
Ooh.
That's
all 2. German.
Yeah, that's 3 now. Yeah.
Friendly.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Ooh. Poison. I don't know what that says about me, but it would probably be poison.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oh God.
That's a great title. I love it.
That's my title.
Oh, there's so many things. So
Who let the cat out?
Sorry, it's. Oh yeah. Plan your product. How to plan your product before you start a company behind it, so you don't have to fix all your early mistakes of building it without any commercial intent behind it.
That's a long title. It is a long title. But Lennart, I tell you what, I would totally read that.
Yeah, so I think Lennart had it right with the title and then the subtitle.
Yes.
Was, oh God, there's so many things. And then that title for the subtitle.
You know what? That's my book. That's my book.
That's my
book. Oh God, there's so many things.
Lennart, what is your favorite hacker movie, and why is it hack? No, what's your favorite hacker movie?
Favorite hacker movie is. God, I'm so bad with movies. It is. I mean, it might probably just be Hackers. Honestly, that's a boring answer, but I think that's.
I approve. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Fictional or otherwise.
Alive, dead, fictional.
What? I forgot her name. What's the?
Angelina Jolie.
George Clooney's wife, because I think she's awesome, and she's not standing in the shadow of George Clooney. Except I remember his name, but not hers. I know it's a bad example.
Mrs. Clooney,
and she's very Mrs. Clooney, and she's very. I think she's a great person. And from father, celebrity.
Why not just George Clooney?
I take both of them. How awesome is that?
There you go.
It's the Clooney's.
Lennart, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Well, with that, we'll take a short break. Dutch Schwartz is coming up next to talk about migrating from on-prem to the cloud. Stick around.